All right, so my name again, Kat Murphy. I work for a company named Orsys. We're located in Frederick, Maryland, and we do custom web development. I've been with the company for 7 years, which I know to a lot of you is a long time with one company. I like to say I grew up at Orsys. And so I've worked on really small website projects to very large integrated custom, complex systems. And so with that, I've learned a lot of tips and tricks, especially when it comes to running a schedule. And so why I'm talking about schedules today are for two reasons. Number one, at Orsys, I've kind of become the schedule DPM. When a project comes in with a super tight timeline, I'm often the project manager that gets assigned to those projects because I've been able to build these tools and tricks to lead a project to a schedule and really hold both our team and the client to that. And also because I wanted you to leave today, in the past two summits I've been to, my favorite parts are the tangible things that when I leave, I can immediately enforce and add to my project. So tools and tips that I can add in. So I want to try to give you that in the next 9 minutes because I've already burned one. So let's go. So what I have here is drive into a schedule. Looks like we're not working there, but that's all right. There we go. So driving to a schedule and minimizing accidents along the way. So do we see this either way on the sides? These cars, they're like kind of moving and grooving. There's no one moderating that traffic, right? They're just kind of coming and going. That's what a really awesome project schedule looks like, right? Your teams are moving, your clients moving. You're doing a lot of work in the background to make that happen, but no one can even see you. So that's awesome. That's the goal. That's where we want to try to get, right? And so how do we get there? So you don't want to do that, but to not do that, you have to plan your route. So you don't want to have this crazy, right, that you're driving, your team's flailing, people don't even have their seatbelts on, and you don't even know where you're going, so you got to plan your route. Number two, Cruella, I thought was appropriate since we're in Disney, but has anyone ever felt like that, 2 hands on the wheel, going crazy at the end of a project because you're just losing your mind and no one cares about the schedule and how are you going to get this all done? You have to communicate your progress along the way to avoid becoming that. And number 3, we had to get there safely, so we can't steamroll our teams, right? We can't be that bus that's driving over cars or our coworkers' projects or our clients. We have to get there safely. So let's break this down a little bit. Plan your route. How do we do that? So create your schedule, step number 1, right? And how do you create your schedule? There's a million different ways to create a schedule. I couldn't possibly cover it all in 10 minutes, but these are the 2 key things. Number 1, work with your team. Do not create a schedule without working with your team. Now, I know sometimes I've been given many projects that it's like, hey, you got to launch by January 2nd, and then you have to work a way to get there, or February 15th, or all sorts of different dates that may get thrown out, and then you have to work with your team. How do we get to that point? But if you don't get given that kind of firm deliverable deadline, work with your team as much as possible. And then contingency. I don't know how many DPMs that I've talked to that they don't put schedule contingency in. They may have a budget contingency, but they don't have a schedule contingency. And whenever you can add that schedule contingency, add it. And when you add it, the thing that's important to know is that contingency is yours to manage as the DPM. If you're in control of your schedule, you're in control of that contingency. Now, you may have to use it because another resource got pulled or those sorts of things. You may not always choose when you use your contingency, but it's yours to have. You don't always have to tell people that you have contingency in your schedule. That, again, it's yours to manage. But the flip side of that, really importantly, is if your schedule is so tight that you don't have contingency built in because it's A and then B and then C and everything's just backed right on up to each other, you have to tell people. That's high risk, and we're all about mitigating risk. And so you mitigate that by telling your clients, your team, we don't have contingency. So when X happens and Y gets missed, then we've got a problem. So make sure everyone knows about that with contingency. And I hear you all saying, so what happens when your client pushes for a very aggressive time frame? I've slammed a 9-month project into 5.5 months and launched on time. It's not fun, but it's possible. And the way that it's possible is that you give them milestones along the way that they have to hit along with your team. So we all break out our work for our devs most likely, and we work in either sprints or if we're waterfall, we have milestone dates that we're driving to. You have to do that for your client. So whether it's a website and it's content-based, If it's a system, it's data import or APIs that they have to give you. Set dates and deliverables for them to meet along the way so that if they miss their dates, you're not driving your team to this aggressive schedule and they're far behind and you're going to miss it at the end anyways. So make sure you're keeping your client accountable with those milestones. And with that, at the very beginning, before you do any work, tell them what will happen if they miss a deadline, if they add things, if they change things. So we usually talk about how that will affect their budget, right? We're so budget focused that we're like, yeah, you added something, that's scope creep. It's gonna cost more money, but it's also gonna take more time. And so if they miss something, you have to explain to them the effect of that before they miss anything so that you've already had that easy conversation at the kickoff to kind of have under your belt for when the tough conversation comes later. Because I'm going to promise you, it's going to come later. So you plan your route, and then you have to communicate your progress along the way. A couple tips for that. Cause and effect, right? So before something's missed, you want to talk about what's going to happen when you miss that. So X happens and gets missed, then we won't be able to do Y, which causes this. So think ahead about what's coming too, because it's not always X and Y, right? Sometimes we know that you may miss C, and D and E are okay, but F and G and H down the road, that's going to be a problem and we're not going to be able to hit those. So you have to make sure you're seeing the big picture because your client often isn't looking at that big picture. Your team isn't looking at that big picture. They're relying on you to kind of help them fill those pieces in. And number 3, and I've learned this the tough way, clients make up their own assumptions what happens when they miss something. Anyone else have this experience when they think they missed it by one day, and so that means that their date for launch only pushed one day? It doesn't work that way, right? Sometimes it does, but often it's a 2-week sprint or a vendor that you have to pull in, and we miss their cycle, and oh gosh, now we have to scramble to try to fit into the next one, and you're all over the place. So make sure they understand that kind of cause and effect. The second point, and this one pains my heart a little bit, but no one's going to care about your schedule as much as you do. Yeah, I know, but they're not. And so I love schedules, but it's your job to make sure everyone knows about the schedule. Don't just paste or copy and paste your schedule into an email or post it in Basecamp or tell them about it once and you told them what would happen if they missed it and you might have told them the cause and effect, but you never talk about it again. No, you have to talk about it all the time. You have to keep them updated. These are our next milestones. This is what's going to happen when I miss them. Make sure you make it easy for your stakeholders. That's your job as a digital project manager, to give them the information they need in the way that they can absorb it. And the hardest one on here, y'all, the hardest one is the third one. Follow through when they miss things, change things, or add things. So this is the hard one because that's when you have to stand in front of them or call them or you're video conferencing with them to say, hey, remember in the kickoff meeting when I told you what would happen when we miss things? And then I told you throughout the way of those cause and effects. So you did all that prep work to make this a little bit easier, but you still have to say, we're not launching on January 1st, or we're not going to hit this, which is going to cause Y. But you have to give them their options, and you have to help them find solutions along the way to make everyone successful. And an important tip here, you have contingency, right? If hopefully you have some contingency, and they miss that, you still hold them on the first time. They don't know always about your contingency. Make sure you stand true. Don't lose your clout the first time they miss something, and you're like, oh, don't worry, our team will make it up, it's fine. The next time they miss something, they're going to fall back on the fact that you said it was fine, even though you told them when they missed things something was going to happen. Follow through. You can always give it back to them later. You can always be the hero that sets your team up that they did it faster and you got them in and that you can launch still back on time. But follow through. And the last thing is get there safely. So work with your team. Don't make promises that are going to force them to work overtime without their buy-in, because I've done that. Don't do it. It's not fun. Your team hates you. You learn the hard way on that one, because sometimes it doesn't happen. Then you have to go back and tell your client that, yes, you said you could do this, but you really can't. Make sure you work with your team. And don't forget about your budget. I know this was all about schedule, but when you add more resources or overtime, it can blow your budget really quickly. So it's both. They go hand in hand, but make sure you keep an eye on your budget. And then the last thing I think is really important. You can only drive so fast. So when it feels like you're out of control, like you're going to crash, slow down, take a breath, reevaluate. Yeah, I'm going to stand here. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to be super vulnerable, right? I have a project right now that was supposed to launch a year ago, and it's still not live. Yeah, a year. And I did all of these things, and it didn't launch because of the client and because of and we're working with them, and every time they miss something, we work with them to set a new schedule. But it happens. So if you need someone up here to tell you that it's okay that your project's over schedule, it's okay. But what's not okay is not doing anything about it. You have to start right now and reset expectations, realign your team, and then keep pushing forward. Set a new date. Keep moving. All right, y'all. So thank you so much. My name again was Kat. If you have a schedule that you want me to look at, here's my email. I'll look at your schedule. If you want to practice that tough conversation, call me. I'll go through with it for you. Thank you guys so much.